Atto arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the Sublime One, the Worthy One, the Fully Enlightened One. So, welcome to this Dhamma talk. I see a few people. I'm not sure if I recognize you, if you've been to any of my talks or events. Ruby, have you ever been to any of my events? Severian, I'm not sure. I think might sound familiar. But so anyway, yeah, okay, I thought so. So every time there's somebody new, I always like to give an introduction. Okay. So basically, my name is Jayantha. That's my Pali name that I was given when I took the 8 lifetime precepts. But my name that I used to have here is Ferox. I've been on staff at the Buddha Center for 2 years. I do a couple different things during the week. Mainly a Basics of Buddhism class on Sunday mornings. Well, depending on where you live, it could be later on if you're in Europe. But I do a metta meditation here on Thursdays, and every Tuesday we have a Dhamma talk. Now, I'm a 34-year-old lay Buddhist disciple of the Theravada tradition, and actually, Jishu, I think that's just what Evil said. She had to install a new version. So, oh wait, he can't hear me. I'm talking to somebody who can't hear me. There we go. Okay. So I'm a 34-year-old lay Buddhist disciple of the Theravada tradition. What that means is I'm not a monk or a master or a guru or anything like that. I'm just a regular lay Buddhist disciple that was lucky enough or unlucky enough, depending on how much you enjoy public speaking, to become a teacher here at the Buddha Center. And what we do here is a Dhamma talk. Those of you, if you're familiar with how monastics give Dhamma talks, there's usually the first half, first half an hour or a half hour where they give a talk, and you're supposed to keep your questions till the end. And then the second half is usually like a question and answer period. So since I'm not a monastic, and since I like to have a little bit more of a discussion, feel free to make comments or ask questions while I'm talking, because listening to me drone on for 40 minutes can be quite the interesting experience. Okay, so let's the topic that I wanted to discuss today was the 3 characteristics of existence. Does anybody know what the 3 characteristics of existence are? Welcome, Nomer. Has anybody heard of the 3 characteristics of existence before? Actually, I know that you've mostly probably heard of all 3 of them. You just never heard of them together. The 3 characteristics of existence. The Buddha taught that all compound things, all conditioned things, have these 3 characteristics. First is Anicca, which, unless you know Pali, you probably don't know what that is. I'll explain to you what you'll know what it is when I say the English word. The second is Dukkha. Those of you who know a little Pali, you might know what Dukkha is. And the third is Anatta. And some of you might know what Anatta is as well. So all conditioned existence, all things in existence, have these 3 characteristics. Now, that's the Pali. Those of you who hear me talk, you know I love Pali, so any chance I get to say the Pali words, I will. So let's go to the English, at least the best translations we have for these 3 words, which oftentimes are not really good translations at all. A lot of these words, it's very hard to find one English word that's an equivalent. So a lot of teachers will just stick to the Pali word because it makes more sense to use that word. The first word, anicca, You all know what it is. It's impermanence. All things are impermanent. The second word is dukkha. Now, dukkha is often translated as suffering. So when you read English translations of the Dhamma, or when people talk about English, in English writing, you often hear the term suffering. But it doesn't quite, dukkha is one of those words that like I just said, it doesn't quite fit to say suffering, because it just doesn't, because then people say, well, life isn't always suffering. First noble truth, what is it? That existence is dukkha. Conditioned existence is dukkha. And so then people say, life is suffering. Nah, there's good parts to life too. See, that's why dukkha is more than just suffering. A good translation that I like to use is dissatisfactory or unsatisfactory. Unsatisfactory is what you'll hear often when they talk about the three characteristics of existence. The translation for dukkha is unsatisfactory. And what that is, what dukkha is when we do not realize that things are impermanent, we attach to things. And because we attach and we don't realize that they will change, we suffer. That is dukkha. Now the third is the most complicated of all, and it's the one that, unless you're a stream winner, unless you're a sotapanna, this is somebody who only has 7 lives left before they become enlightened. Unless you're a stream winner, you don't truly know what this is. You can only kind of see hints of it or think about it intellectually. The third is anatta, which is not self. That there is not a permanent, substantial self anywhere to be seen. So, anything in existence, from our mind and our body to the universe itself, has these 3 characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. So let's go back and we'll talk about each individually. Impermanence. Impermanence is one of those things that I think most people can understand, and most people see to a certain degree in their daily lives, even without practicing meditation. You know and you see that things are ever changing. There is not one thing in existence that is not changing from second to second. Even if when we look at it with our eyes, it seems like it's been the same. You could look at a rock for 1,000 years and it might not look like it changed for that whole 1,000 years, but it did. It was eroded. The molecules changed, etc. Same thing with the human body. We have trillions of cells in our body, and those cells are continuously being born, living their lifespan, however long that is, and dying out and being replaced by new cells. Even the universe itself is ever changing. We first thought that the universe was static, right? That's because that's what we saw. But then we thought the universe is coming in on itself, that it's contracting. But then, when we had even better telescopes and better ways to look at it, we see that the universe is expanding. It's ever expanding. And so it's ever changing. Almost all of the galaxies and stars that we can see from our planet Earth are moving away from us at thousands of miles a second. So even the universe itself is ever changing. And the universe itself has the same cycle that everything has. that cycle is birth, peaking or continued existence, and then death. Astrophysicists say that eventually all of the stars, the billions and billions of stars in this universe, will eventually run out of gas. Eventually this universe will become dark, dead, and cold. Now that might not be for trillions of years. For us, that seems like an eternity, but it's not. Even the universe itself is impermanent. And now, of course, the astrophysicists, if you're an astronomy buff like I am, you like to listen to people like Michio Kaku, or the one guy from PBS, I always forget his name. And they talk about how now astrophysicists and scientists think that Neil deGrasse Tyson, that was his name, they think that there's actually a multiverse, that even universes are just, there are innumerable amounts of universes that are born and die. They crash into each other, they create new universes. So impermanence is just such a basic fact of life. And it's a fact that we see to a certain extent, and we understand with our intellect to a certain extent. But experientially, with wisdom, we either want to totally ignore that and not feel that it's real, or we just don't see the reality of it. We don't see, or we don't want to see, that everything that we ever love, we will one day be separated from. We don't see that we are subject to old age, suffering, old age, sickness, and death. Especially, we don't see that we want to ignore old age, right? Think about all the makeup and the wrinkle this and the Botox and the everything that we do, men and women, to fight the age. Even our mentality, right? 60 is the new 40. You know, we have to be 60. Nobody wants to be 60. We're really 40. Now, of course, there's something to be said about in your mind, staying young in your mind. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. There's a difference between staying young in your mind and blindly trying to deny that you're growing old. You will see the occasional that the 95-year-old guy, right? There's a wonderful video that I have of, and it's called "Never Leave the Playground," and it's this 95-year-old guy doing all of these things that people in the 30s can't do today in our country, doing like tightrope things and doing all these little mobility exercises that he does to stay in shape. And this is a 95-year-old guy, and that was his motto: never leave the playground. So there's a difference between having that kind of mentality as a way of living life positively and accepting your age, but living, in your mind being young, and totally denying that you're growing old. That is totally ignoring impermanence. And you know what I just said, when we ignore impermanence, what is it? What happens? Dukkha. Dukkha. Oh, that's what the practice does. The practice allows us to accept reality. We know when we get into a new relationship with a man or a woman, we know this will end. We don't want to think that, do we? Because we have this honeymoon period, we're in love. Oh, I love this person, blah, 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 blah. You don't want to even think about eventually it'll end. Now, some people, they get married once, and maybe they're married for 50 years. Some people, they get married 5 times in 6 years. But no matter how long of a time period, eventually you will be separated from that person that you love. Whether it's through death, whether it's through lack of desire and you know, falling out of love, whatever it is, eventually you're going to be separated from that person. And the irony of accepting that, all things are impermanent. My relationship with this person is impermanent. It will one day end. I will lose this person one day. The irony of accepting that and seeing that for reality is that you cherish every single second you have with that person. You are not attached to that person. You enjoy the time you have, and when it's time for them to go, they go. That is knowing impermanence with your wisdom. You don't have this attachment to this person where you understand that they will be there for X amount of time, whether it's a year, a day, or 50 years. And you accept when they have to go, whether it's through death, whether it's through they leave, whatever. And that's not just for people, and that's not just for like a romantic relationship. That's for every relationship we have with everything in existence. Whether it's a family member, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whether it's your car, your favorite guitar, all of these things. Ajahn Chah talks about the glass, his favorite glass. I like this glass, and I see that it has a crack in it. And one day when this glass breaks, most people will say, ah, it broke. But I see it as already broke. So when it breaks, that's naturally what happens. So if you are able to see your items as naturally broken already, when they break, there's no suffering. What is that? That's being detached from these things. And detachment is not a negative thing. Detachment is not enjoying the time that you have with that item or that person. Detachment is simply not attaching to it, that person or item, so that when it's time to go, it goes and there's no dukkha involved in it. How do you do that? Practice. The only way to do that is to practice your meditation, because you come to see that naturally. Now, let me say this. Even if you practice, you will know that because you have an attachment, you will suffer. Now, that's not to say that you should be negative about your attachments. Oh, I have this attachment, I'm a bad Buddhist, blah, 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 blah. No. That's not how it works. You just know. And see, this is the thing about Buddhism. There's no punitiveness. There's no good or bad. All there is just action, reaction, cause and effect. Because you have an attachment, you will have dukkha from that attachment. Because you love, if that person dies or ends the relationship, you will have suffering because of that. And you don't make a vow from here on in, I'll never have suffering, I'll never be attached to anything. That doesn't work. That's not how it works. As you practice, as you develop experiential wisdom, in Buddhism, when we're talking about wisdom, we're not talking about I read a lot of books, or I read all of the Dhamma, the scriptures, the suttas, so I'm really wise. No. That's not how wisdom goes. Wisdom is seeing things, seeing the reality, seeing things as they truly are through your own experience. That is panya. That's wisdom. So when we talk about wisdom in Buddhism, that's what we're talking about. There's a huge difference between reading a lot about impermanence and kind of understanding what it means compared to seeing it directly through your own experience. There's a huge difference. And the only way you kind of understand that difference is by the practice itself. The more you practice, the more you see that all these things are impermanent. And if we know that they're impermanent, truly know that they're impermanent, then there's a dispassion. Then there's, okay, so why am I attached to these things? Now that's not saying, I'm not attached anymore. See you guys later. I'm not dealing with you people anymore. That's not how it works either. That's just being able to be there in the present moment with these people without attachment. To accept when they have to leave our lives. That is what understanding impermanence is. And if we don't understand impermanence, I'm going to move to the second part because I've already been yapping for almost 20 minutes and we're just on the first part. So the second part is dukkha. And I'll tell you what the Buddha said dukkha is. Birth is dukkha. Sickness is dukkha. Old age is dukkha. Death is dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, despair is dukkha. Separation from the loved or separation from the pleasing is dukkha. These are things that you attach, you like these things. These things are pleasant to you. You want more, you crave it. And when you're separated from it, you suffer, you have dukkha. And of course, union with the unpleasing, being around people that you don't like, having things happen to you that you don't want to happen, like you get fired, or like you get sick, or anything. That's what union with the unpleasing, the displeasing is. Something that, these things that you have an aversion to, you don't like them, but guess what? Knock knock, they're at your door and they ain't going away. That's dukkha, because you have union with these things. So separation from what is beloved is dukkha. Union with what is not loved is dukkha. That is all dukkha. That's exactly what the Buddha says is dukkha. That is his definition for dukkha. Now, in terms of an English definition for dukkha, when I do my Basics of Buddhism class and we go over dukkha, on Access to Insight, there is under dukkha, there's a whole paragraph of probably about 30 or 40 words that they say this is the definition for dukkha. And Damaris knows, the evil knows that you've been to my class, so you know I read that whole thing in one breath. Right? It's a lot of words. So that there's no one word that explains dukkha. But dukkha is also not just what we think of as suffering. When we say dukkha is separation from the pleasing, what we were like, right? Even a relationship is dukkha. A relationship is dukkha because one day we will be separated from that relationship. Now we might think that's really pessimistic. Well, I might enjoy 50 years with this person. But according to Buddhism, it's still dukkha. It's still an attachment that you have that leads to suffering. The Buddha talks about three types of love: eros, philia, and metta. Eros is romantic love, marital love. I love this person, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. Philia is familial love, family. I love my mother, my father, my siblings, my children. Metta is unconditional love for all beings. Equanimity, right? Marital and family love is not unconditioned. It is conditioned love. It is a strong attachment to specific beings. And, just as I said before, and this is not a judgment thing, it's just something that is. Is this when you know that when you touch your hand to a fire, it'll be burned. So, just as so, if you have attachments, one day, those attachments will be severed. and you will have dukkha because of it. So the family love and marital love, one day you'll be separated. Separation from what is pleasing. One day you'll be separated from these people. So it is not unconditional, and it has that characteristic, dukkha. Metta, on the other hand, is unconditional, equanimous, loving friendliness for all beings. So this is why in Buddhism metta is taught as very important, because it is free of dukkha, because it is without like or dislike. At least that's what we're trying to develop. We want to, in our minds, eventually have the same loving friendliness for a great white shark, or that snake that we don't like, or those spiders that we don't like. The same as for dolphins and all these cute animals that we like. We want to have the same loving friendliness no matter what the being, because we know that all beings, even those spiders, even those dolphins, even Adolf Hitler, even any bad human or good human you could ever think of, all beings want to be well, happy, and peaceful. Yes, even insects. So, all conditioned phenomena has this dukkha as part of it. This dukkha, it's sort of like when you marry somebody, right? You don't marry just that person. You marry their mother, their father, their brothers and sisters. Like when you marry into somebody, you marry that family, and you're stuck with them for as long as you're married to that person, right? Sometimes that's a good thing. You know, those of you who know that my wife, I was married. My wife passed away 7 years ago. I still see her family regularly. I love her family. They're good people. So sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes, not so much. But, so you know that when you marry into that person, you marry the whole family, right? Same thing as when you attach to something that has dukkha as one of its characteristics, then you know eventually you're going to have dukkha. Maybe it's not tomorrow, maybe it's 50 years from now, maybe it's whenever, but eventually it has that characteristic. So all conditioned phenomena have the characteristic that they're ever changing. They have the characteristic that if attached to, you will suffer, for lack of a better term. You will have dukkha. I don't like using that term, suffer. I really don't. I just like dukkha. But sometimes when speaking to people who are not used to hearing dukkha, the word doesn't have the same gravity, so I don't know. But so now the third one is the hardest one. The third one is extremely hard to grasp, and that is anatta, not self. That all conditioned phenomena have the characteristic of not self. No permanent being or soul. No substantiality to it. And I will talk about anatta because I can talk about impermanence and dukkha pretty well from my own experience. But anatta is where a lot of what I have to say comes more from my book knowledge and my listening to teachers than my actual experience. Anatta is one of the hardest things to truly see, to truly know with your panya, with your experiential wisdom. And as a matter of fact, that is one of the things that a Sotapanna, this is a stream winner, this is somebody who has progressed enough on the path that they only have at minimum 7 lifetimes left before they become enlightened. One of the things, there's a couple things. One of the things that the Sotapanna has is they don't have doubt anymore about the Buddha and the teachings. They don't have doubt. They don't have a reliance on rites and rituals. And they see that there is Anatta, not self. And I'm the first one to tell you that people say, the scriptures and the teachers will say, a Sotapanna knows that he is a Sotapanna. And I can say pretty thoroughly that I know I'm not a Sotapanna. So I will not be able to speak about Anatta through much experience. Although I feel like I have been able to poke around the edges a little bit. There's a few insights of Anatta. And this is that, and this is not, it's often translated or thought of as no self. There's a difference between not self and no self. No self would mean that everything is like it's an illusion, like it's a dream, like it doesn't exist. Buddha never taught that. What the Buddha taught is that this thing that we consider I, me, mine, this ego, this body, is consistent of 5 khandhas, 5 aggregates. And I did a talk on the 5 aggregates, 5 aggregates. These 5 aggregates are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. So that is what makes you up. And so the Buddha talks about observing with mindfulness. Observe, where is this I? Where is this me, mine? And one of the practices is to observe the parts of the body. Is this me? Is this I? Is this in my hand? Is this in my fingers? Is this in my wrists? Is this in my brain? Is this in my heart? Where is this thing that I call I? And just to backtrack a little bit to impermanence, they talk about impermanence is even the person that you are now. The person that you are now is not the same person, physically and mentally, as the person you were 15 years ago or 10 years ago, right? So, what things, if you really think about it, what things do I consider come together to be me back then, and what things do I consider that come together to be me now? What is me? What do I describe as me? Is it my likes and my dislikes, right? I like dance music, I don't like rap music. I like these people, I don't like this person. I like to watch Discovery Channel, I don't like to watch, I don't know, Dancing with the Stars or something. What is this? All these likes and dislikes, it's like this list. Check, 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 check. Okay, here's me. It's like, so should I just like wear a shirt that has all my likes and dislikes? This is the person I call Joe, which is my given name. Although I like Jayantha a lot better, but that's me because I like the poly. So what is this? Is this me? What is this? Is this is me my brain? You know, so these are like this kind of contemplation, meditation is what the Buddha talks about, suggesting to help come to the realization that there is no These things have not self, right? There is no self in my hand. There is no self in my leg. There is no or not self in any of these parts. Now, to say that there's no self would mean that there's no five aggregates, there's no form, feeling, perception. These things, according to the Buddha, as far as my experiences knows from what I've learned, these exist. These are things that exist. However, what we just come to find is that there's no substantiality behind them. That there's no self that lays claim to this. Now, the complications and where it doesn't help to intellectualize not self, because you can go nuts with it. You can start thinking, well, what about this? What about that? Experiencing it through our own practice is the best way to do this. So you can I was thinking about where I was going and I just lost it. See, there's not self in my train of thought, right? It was just spouting out, and now it messed itself up. Okay, so, well, I've also been speaking for 40 minutes, so I guess if there's any comments or questions or anything like that at this point, we can continue. But these three characteristics are what the Buddha taught all conditioned things are made up of. Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. And if you're like me, the first two are somewhat fairly easy to see. And if you start your practice, even in the beginnings of your practice, you'll start to see this. The third one, Anatta, is much harder. I think one of the first times that I had this question of, who is this? And I did a talk a couple of weeks ago about the ego, where I think there's a little bit more of anatta in that talk, where I talked about how you watch, as you progress in your practice, you see this ego, and this ego says these funny things that when you start to observe it, it cracks you up. It's like you're watching somebody else think crazy things on the TV, and you're just this casual observer, and you're laughing. My first experience with that, and that feels like a not self, right? Because if the ego is not you, then what is this ego, right? And that gets confusing. The first time I think that happened to me was the first time I had a true sense of pure mindfulness, and where my monkey mind totally quieted down. Or I was doing my, evils and demerits, I've heard me say this a billion times, but I was doing my walking meditation at work. And Jishu, I'll read and respond to what you just said there. And I appreciate you commenting and adding to the discussion. That's exactly what I like to see. So I was at work and I was doing my walking meditation, and my mind wanted to sing Sweet Caroline by whatever lounge. I always forget the guy's name. I don't know if it's Neil Diamond or whatever. That poor guy. But, so I just said, okay, if you want to sing that, mind, then sing it. So my mind's singing Sweet Caroline. And then, yes, Neil Diamond. Yeah, I remembered after all this time. And all of a sudden I noticed with confusion that my mind wasn't singing anymore. As a matter of fact, it wasn't doing anything. The monkey mind wasn't going nuts. What do I have to do in work when I go back in 10 minutes? What do I have to do tonight? I like this girl. I don't want to deal with this person when I have to go upstairs. All of those things that come through your head, right? There was nothing. It was total silence. And I was confused. I was like, what the hell's going on here? This is weird. And that was the first time I think that I had like a detachment from the ego. And the further I've gotten in my practice, I see that more and more, to the point where, like I said, the ego is this like funny character. So if you're like familiar with like Seinfeld or whatever, some sitcom, right, where the main character's in the house and then like some funny character comes in the house and does something silly or whatever, or says something. That's like what the ego is to me. It's almost like watching a sitcom. It's like you'll be doing something, you'll be going through life, and then your ego will say, or will want you to do this, or want you to say this, or it will think this. And you just laugh. You say, what is this ego doing? When you do your first noble silence meditation retreat, 7 days or 3 days or 5 days where you can't talk, that's when you'll really start to see your ego and what it does. And you start to develop a detachment from this thing. What is this thing? Now, of course, the question else is, what if this is what you thought you were before, but now you see it's something different? Then what are you? So it even gets even more confusing as you go along, which is why I often don't think about it. I just let it, shelf it. A lot of things in Buddhism, if you try to think about it with your intellectual mind, you'll go nuts. So that's when you shelf it and you just continue with the practice. I have confidence and faith that things will become more clear the more I practice. And I have confidence and faith in that because I've seen this happen in my practice. I know that it happens. So that's an important thing to know too. Well, that's kind of getting a little bit off a topic, but it's all connected. So when you have this ego, you wonder, what is this ego talking about? What's going on? Like, for instance, this morning, I do my normal walking meditation back and forth on one side of my office building. I go to work early. I have to be at work at 9. I get there around like 8:15, 8:20, and I do until 8:55. I do half the time walking meditation, half the time sitting meditation. And I usually walk down one side of the building. But this time there was a worker there, and I didn't want to bother him, so I walked down the other side of the building. And as I was doing my walking meditation, there was this woman who agitated my ego. This woman who came out, and she was smoking, and she was being around, and she was kind of in my way, right? My ego is like, that woman's in my way. Now, of course, outwardly, you'd never think that this was in my mind. My eyes were concentrated down. There was no expression on my face. But this is what the mind does. This is the ego, right? And the more you practice, the more you're able to just observe that and not act on it. Now, say if I was somebody who never practiced, somebody who seems so angry outwardly, right? If that happened, they wouldn't even have the mindfulness to understand where it was coming from, and they would just act on it. They would scowl at the person, or they would say something. But when you practice, you're able to detach from these thoughts. So it's like my ego is agitated because this woman's in my way. And because it's agitated, it has to justify why it's agitated. And the justification for my ego was, she's a smoker. She's annoying. She's this, or she's just ugly, right? And this is your ego. Now, if you're honest with yourself, you see this. This is what your ego does. You know, and some people kind of wonder, like, whoa, you're teaching people Dhamma, and this is the kind of stuff your ego says. But this is what happens in all of our minds, and we have to be honest with ourselves and see things and to observe it objectively and to not be attached to that. And that only happens when you practice, right? And so I knew that even though I had this, my mind had this agitation because of this woman's presence, which is funny because I normally am not over there anyway. That poor woman might be there every day doing that same things, not being bothered, but because I had to move, I became agitated by this woman, right? Because she was in my way. I, me, mine. So this is the way the ego is. And the more we see it, the more we detach from it, the more we laugh at it. The more we understand how, like the title of my talk about the ego a couple of weeks ago was Ego, Thou Art Crazy. And it sure is, because it says and does some crazy stuff. Thankfully, I never have to, nobody ever has to hear it outside of my mind. Imagine if people could hear our minds, right? They'd probably either hate us or put us in a mental institution. Thankfully, we are stuck with our own minds. And we are the only ones that have to deal with our own minds. But, okay. I think that's pretty much it. So we still have 10 minutes if there's any more comments or questions. Jishu, I'm going to read what you typed now. I said I was going to do that probably about 7-8 minutes ago, but I kept going on and on again. So. The universal self. Okay. I'm not sure if that's I'm not too familiar with that difference. I don't know if that might be a Mahayana thing that I'm not familiar with. There's also something that is called the breath body, which people also think is like another self or another body, but it's actually part of the practice of observing the breath. And that I'm not too familiar. I'm just learning about that now myself as well. So, welcome, Delani. And what did he say? Nope, no merit. That's exactly what we're talking about. Is that Buddhism teaches that there is no soul. A soul would mean a permanent entity that goes from body to body, right? That's Buddhism teaches that there is no such thing as this permanent soul. That is the concept of Anatta, not self. Ah, see, Lena, now we get into, and Noam too, it's kind of connected there. Now we get into confusions, right? If there is not a self, if there is not a permanent self, then what's reborn? That's when we get into confusions. And no, let me just double check here. It's a universal mind. Again, what Jishu said about the universal mind, I don't know if I can comment on that because that's not something that I'm very familiar with. I never want to ever misrepresent any concept, especially when something I don't know or something in the Mahayana that I'm not familiar with. I never want to misrepresent it, so I'll never talk about that. So how can you be well, first of all, about the topic of rebirth and reincarnation. Buddhists do not believe in rebirth, and they don't believe in reincarnation. They believe in becoming or re-becoming. That's why if you read the suttas, you will not see reborn, rebirth. You will see become or becoming. And the reason for that is the concept of rebirth and reincarnation predates Buddhism. We're talking about Hinduism, Brahmanism, all of those other isms in India at the time that had the similar concepts of karma, of rebirth, etc. In Hindu, what we have is, I think that's Atman is Hindu, no? Jishu? I'm not sure. But what we have is that there is a permanent soul that is reborn, that is incarnated. Carne is like a body, reincarnated. So in reincarnation and rebirth, the concept is that there is a permanent soul that is reborn. In Buddhism, in becoming, what is reborn are the five aggregates. What is reborn is craving. There is something called a citta, C-I-T-T-A. And what a citta is a moment of experience. Every moment of this citta holds every experience that you've ever had. So what happens is, every second, a citta that you have now, it's dying, and then there's a new citta. And it's dying, and then there's a new citta. So this citta, when you die, is a special citta that basically has this, because you have this craving for the sensual pleasures, you have this craving to want to attach to things, that lasts with the mind, with the citta, even after the death of the physical body. The mind, the citta, attaches to another physical form. Now, that does not mean that the next life, you're the same person as the last life. They talk about that there can be, that there can be some tendencies that might transfer over, but it's not, you cannot say in Buddhism, I was Julius Caesar in a former life. I was this person in a former life. That's me. You know, so because I was Julius Caesar in a former life, I'm a great general in this life. That's not how it works in Buddhism. You might have been Julius Caesar in a former life, who knows? But you're not Julius Caesar now. Just as yourself 10 years ago is very different than yourself now, yourself 10 lifetimes ago is very different than this life. So that is a Buddhist explanation in short. It can get very detailed and complicated, and I'm definitely not qualified to explain it any more detail than that, because in all honesty, I don't know in much more detail than that. I need to learn a lot more about that. But that is in short what it is. There's these things called citta. That is your moment of experience. And they hold all of your, it's all very confusing. The great thing about Buddhism is that nobody forces you to believe in anything. There is nothing to believe in Buddhism. If you don't believe, or if you don't feel that rebirth or that karma or that reincarnation, becoming, if you don't see that for yourself, see that as reality, then that's fine. You can shelf that. Me personally, I'm agnostic. I cannot say for 100% truth that there's rebirth. Now what I can say is, I tend to believe in it, but I'm not going to say that that's logical. What I can say is that I tend to believe in it because since I can remember, it felt right to me. it made more sense. It was something I liked. So for me, while I can't say is I know rebirth is true 100%, I kind of feel like it's right. And it makes sense in scientific terms, because even Albert Einstein, the equations, energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. And that's what we are. What everything is energy. So it kind of makes sense. You know, some kind of that of becoming, or some kind of changing. So for me, but I can never say that I know for a fact 100% that becoming is true. Now, where was I going? I'm doing that a lot today, right? That's because my mind is still calming down from this craziness of a day. Oh yeah, where was it going? Does that bother me in my practice? No, it doesn't. Because you don't eat in the Kalama Sutta. This is the sutta where the famous phrase comes that everybody knows and everybody kind of misuses. Do not go by reports, by conjecture, by what somebody says. Only when something is known to be true through your own wisdom, and with something that is beneficial. You know, that's that sutta. That's the Kalamas. And in that sutta, the Buddha says, because these are people who are questioning at this point. There's a lot of teachers back in the Buddha's day, and they're teaching a lot of different things. And so they're questioning the Buddha, who's another teacher. They say, okay, well, you know, you teacher, all these other teachers say this. What do you say? And so what the Buddha's saying in this is what he says about rebirth and karma. Even if there is no such thing as rebirth and karma, and I'm saying rebirth because I'm just so used to saying it because everybody uses it, but becoming. Even if there is no such thing as becoming and karma, there is still benefits to be seen here and now in this practice of Dhamma. And if there is rebirth and karma, then you are doubly rewarded. There is double benefits. So you don't even have to worry about these things that you can't see through your own experience and your own reality. Now, they say that as you progress, as you get deeper and deeper into levels, you understand the concept of becoming. You see it as truth. I'm not there yet, and I'm sure most of you aren't there yet either. So it's really in this stage of belief or non-belief more than anything. Well, hedging your bets, not necessarily. Well, think about it this way, and you know, it's funny because I have this feeling too. And this is one of the million reasons why, to me, Buddhism, when I found Theravada Buddhism and the teachings of the Buddha, it was like a just square peg going into the square hole. It fit me perfect. I always said to myself, if there's a life after death, you know, I'm just going to live a good life, and I'm going to help people and just be kind to people and just have a good life. If there's a life after death, there's a heaven, whatever, okay, fine. If there's not, if there's nothing after death, well, I had a good life. I'm fine with that too. So, and that's the concept of what the Buddha is saying. Whether there is something after death or not, really in the end doesn't matter. What matters is how you live now. Your practice now, being in the moment, being kind to yourself and to others, doing skillful deeds. Skillful deeds are actions of body, speech, and mind that are beneficial to yourself and others. That is the most important thing. More so than what's your next life going to be. As a matter of fact, what's your next life? If there is a next life, that's going to be determined by what you're doing now anyway. So really, in a lot of aspects, it's not even worth caring about what this next life or this reincarnation, rebirth, whatever. What matters is this present moment and what you're doing in this present moment. That's the most important thing. And that's what the Buddha is saying in this sutta. It's not saying, well, you better be good, because, there might be a hell or there might be a rebirth and you might come back as an animal. The Buddha's not saying that. The Buddha's saying that there are many benefits here and now. And the great thing about this practice is when you practice, when you develop metta, when you develop mindfulness, when you do skillful deeds that are beneficial to yourself and others, you not only protect, you not only help, you not only are beneficial to yourself, you're helping all beings. You give beings a gift of fearlessness. And I know this practice works because I see it in my own experience. I do child protective services. I am in many houses, many strange houses, meeting new people all the time, meeting new animals, new kids all the time. I cannot tell you how many times somebody has said, and I just got this tonight, oh wow, my dogs always bark at people. My dogs always do this to people. My dogs always do that. They're always not trusting. Why are they licking you? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? That is the practice. Those animals, people, animals, children, especially animals and children, because they have senses, they understand things that adults don't. We lose a lot of that when we become an adult. They know, they can tell who they can trust, who is a kind, calm person. They can tell. And when you get to your practice and you start seeing that, you start like, it's almost like if you're Catholic, St. Francis, who has all the animals around him or whatever, is like, oh wow, all these animals, all these creatures, they all love me. They all have, what that is? That's faith, that's trust. The Buddha says that when you practice the 5 precepts, which is living a moral life, when you practice metta, you become dear to human beings, you become dear to non-human beings. You give a gift of fearlessness to all beings. They know that they can trust you. They know that they don't have to worry about you hurting them. That is what you do. When you do that practice, you are giving that gift to all beings. That's the amazing part of the practice. And that's something that you can see here and now. You don't need to worry to die and maybe see it when you're dead. You can see that here and now. And that's what the Buddha is talking about when he says that you can see this practice here and now. You can see the benefits here and now. That's what the Buddha is talking about when he talks about that. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, and metta is extremely powerful. We do every Thursday, so in 2 days, about this time actually. Well, when we started, we started this 6 o'clock SLT, 5:30 SLT Thursdays. We do a metta guided metta meditation here. And if you've done metta, you know it is very, very powerful. The last retreat I went to was a 7-day metta retreat. 7 days of metta. It's one of my favorite retreats I've ever gone on. It's an amazing experience. Metta is always great. Okay, so since we're over time, unless there's any final comments or questions, I think we can end here. It was nice to meet you, many new friends. Jishu and Severin and Ruby and Lena. And Nomer. Ponder becoming. Yes. Nice to meet new friends, new Dhamma friends, and always good to see old Dhamma friends like Damaris, who I've known Damaris for the 2 years that I've been here. Damaris has been coming along, been part of the Buddhist Center Sangha for a long time. And Evil, who now I've known, Evil has been coming for quite a long time as well. Always, I love Evil is good with impermanence. Do you know why? Because you never know what form Evil's going to be in when she comes. She's always changing. And I like that. I always wonder, what's the next form? Hey, Evil, I don't know if you've seen, we have like a little, behind the cushions here, we have like a little Buddha Center guide, right? And now it says in there, please dress appropriately, etc., etc. And I was talking with JT and Marine and stuff, this was a couple of days ago. We were all, I think, what was it? And I mentioned you. I said, well, I hope that doesn't mean that Evil can't come in all her different crazy AVIs, because if it does mean that, I override that, because I like it. Oh, you came as a dragon once. You come as all kinds of things. I like that. And I don't mind if anybody does that. To me, that doesn't bother me. Well, I think some people have a big issue with people coming that they have guns on their characters. That doesn't bother me either. But I guess that does bother some people. But the less that bother you, the less things that bother you. See? the less dukkha you have, the less things that bother you. So it makes things easier that way. Life is easier. Dealing with people is easier. You can accept people easier. It's just the way it is. Okay, friends. Once again, thank you for coming. Much metta to you all, and Sukhi Hantu. May you be happy. Oh, Evil, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, I put up the first video. Remember I was talking about the journey into homelessness video blog that I wanted to start? Well, I started it. So I put up my first video. If you see my blog, you can see that I posted it up there. Okay, friends. So once again, until next time.